Greetings all you movie junkies and entertainment lovers, and welcome to another retrospective video. Today we're going to take a look at the 1970 series Wonder Woman. Set during the Second World War, American pilot Steve Trevor bails out during a battle over the Bermuda Triangle, which also happens to be the hidden location of Paradise Island, the hidden home of the Amazons. He's then found by the Amazonian princess Diana, played by Lynda Carter, who nurses him back to health and eventually returns with him to America, whilst armed with her bullet-defecting bracelets and golden lasso, which whomever is bound with is forced to tell the truth. This series was a big stepping stone in the evolution of comic book movies and shows, particularly with this of course being a TV series on television. Up to this point, the only really successful comic book slash superhero series was the original 1960s Batman, which was only about a decade earlier. The first season of this series, of course, taking place during the Second World War, mostly pretty much every single episode is basically just Wonder Woman fighting Nazis. That's pretty much the entire first season of the series. It's like, okay, what are the Nazis going to be doing this episode? A format that honestly, even after just one season, kind of gets dry and drawn out, to be honest. But the show was very successful and very well liked and very fun, and had a very similar kind of theme that the original 60s Batman series did, while still being quite a bit more serious, whilst also, still being very campy and comic booky as well. But with the series being a period piece, it was not a cheap show to be made, particularly at that time, and unfortunately, even after strong ratings, ABC cancelled the series after just one season. The series was successful enough where it would be brought back about a year later in 1977 on a different network, CBS, changing the title of the series to The New Adventures of Wonder Woman. However, this time it would not be set during the Second World War, like a lot of the comic books, but instead it would move the character into present day 1977. So they would reintroduce the character in the feature-length second season debut titled The Return of Wonder Woman, which would see Diana returning to civilization after a 35-year absence. They were also able to keep Lyle Wagner on the series as well, playing Steve Trevor's son, Steve Trevor Jr. And there's basically just sort of one more episode done, as the second episode of the second season is basically the last Nazi/World War themed episode, which kind of sort of acts as a sort of end to, that side or aspect, if you will, of the series. And so moving into the second season, this series, really started to, deal with a lot more kind of sci-fi type of aspects, while still being very comic booky, dealing with, various kind of alien invasion type stories and whatnot. Of course, for some people, might feel that this is when the series kind of went downhill, and I have seen very kind of different reactions to, when the series was good, what episodes are bad, and stuff like that. I first discovered and was growing up watching reruns of this series. I first discovered it through when it became The New Adventures of Wonder Woman. So I personally didn't see, any of the first season World War II episodes until much later. Personally, I find myself to enjoy the sort of, second and third seasons of the series much more than the, World War II based episodes. Again, a large part of that just because, kind of the whole, fighting Nazis thing. Personally, I think kind of, after, just a couple of episodes, I think it was starting to dry up, and I think the best thing that ever happened to this series was it getting cancelled by ABC and then moving to CBS in the second season and having it, jump ahead in time and being set, during modern day. I think that was probably the best thing that happened to the series. It's sort of, not quite as cheesy as the 1960s, Batman, but also still kind of fun and goofy enough. The third season mostly stayed the same, but, certain changes were made. They tried to kind of make it so that it was targeted more to a teenage audience. Lynda Carter was also given, a slightly more snazzier, yet still very comic book accurate costume for the second and third seasons as well. So even though it might have moved away from what the traditional comic book version of Wonder Woman was, I think it ultimately made for a better and more enjoyable series in those second and third seasons. Now, the series was, of course, supposed to take place in Washington, D.C., but when you're watching the series, it's very, very painfully obvious that it does not take place in Washington, D.C., but rather, Los Angeles, which, of course, is where it was filmed. And that, unfortunately, was kind of thing where the filmmakers and producers just, struggled to, disguise LA and make it look like Washington, because it just, looks nothing like it. So later in the third season, they finally decided to, just have Diana move from Washington to LA during the last couple episodes. So had the series continued for fourth season, it would have, probably the direction and tone of the show might have shifted a little bit as well. So this show was pretty cheesy, it had a lot of, very goofy storylines, and some episodes were kind of better than others, honestly. But I think what makes this series great was the charm and charisma of Lynda Carter as Wonder Woman. Did such a great job of, portraying this character, which honestly is a very, very difficult character to portray, because not only do you have to, present yourself as, essentially a, what is supposed to be a literal goddess, a beautiful, Amazonian warrior goddess. The character is really what, made the series great, and Lynda Carter's portrayal of the character is what made the series great, even if the series wasn't always, particularly that great. Of course, the series was cancelled after about 3 seasons, and there's never really been any exact reason given as to why the series was cancelled, because as far as you can see, it was getting good ratings, but I think part of the reason that I've seen is that, Lynda Carter just kind of wanted to kind of focus more on her musical career at the time. She ended up basically, having a pretty long career in the 80s and 90s, basically being the lead star of various TV movies, made for TV films, as well as several, one-season wonders as well. Lynda Carter would eventually return to the DC universe, but not as Wonder Woman. She would appear in a recurring role as the president in the CW Supergirl series, and then most memorably in the post-credit scene of Wonder Woman 1984, which was supposed to set up for Wonder Woman 3, which may or may not be happening now. There also has been some talk of them doing an animated movie based on the Wonder Woman series as well, especially after the success of the 2 direct-to-video animated Batman films that were done in the style of the 60s series, which of course had the return of both Adam West and Burt Ward as Batman and Robin. So they were talking about possibly doing the same for the Lynda Carter Wonder Woman, and what they were going to do, which sounded very interesting, was they were going to basically fill in the gap between the timeline between the first season and the second season, which would have been kind of interesting to see, as to, explore kind of that misty area of the series and find out, why did Wonder Woman, go back to Paradise Island in the first place. It would have also been cool if maybe they had done a second or third animated feature to perhaps, kind of give this version of the character a proper ending as well. But unfortunately, all these years later, that animated film seems to have kind of, gone away, and unfortunately it looks like they're not going to be doing that now. But the good news is that the entire original series is now available on Blu-ray in this complete collection Blu-ray set, which is essentially mostly a repackage of the original DVD box set, mostly carrying over most of the same special features, as well as pretty much all of the same packaging design as well. But the Blu-ray transfers that are included on here are pretty great and are definitely worth getting to see the series in this high quality. Some of the first season episodes do look a little bit rough, but that's just generally because the first season, did kind of have a somewhat kind of a more of an old school, cheaper feel to it. But the second and first seasons in particular look pretty great. Of course, I personally, I've made it very clear that I personally prefer when the series moved to more modern day, but a lot of people do prefer the original series that took place, in the, war setting, and I do, enjoy those episodes as well, but I do find myself, sticking more closely to the second and third season episodes than the first season episodes myself when rewatching it. But if you're somebody that, prefers, the first season, this, the Blu-ray collection is still, very much worth getting. Because all those episodes look great as well. And overall, it was just a very, very fun series. Is it the greatest superhero or comic book adaptation ever? No, but it still was very much a fun series, and at the end of the day, this still was a pretty big stepping stone in the superhero / comic book genre, particularly on television. This series, it's weird to think, actually does technically predate the Christopher Reeve Superman, which didn't come out until 1978. And man, would it have been awesome for them to have done some kind of a crossover. I mean, those two versions of those two characters definitely would have fit with each other perfectly, but unfortunately that is something that we'll never see, at least not in live action form. I highly recommend getting the complete collection Blu-ray set if you're a fan of the series. It's definitely worth getting, and yeah, overall it's just a fun series. So there you go guys, that was my thoughts on the original Wonder Woman series. Thanks for watching, and until next time, be sure to consume as much entertainment as humanly possible, and I will see you in the next video.